the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
We have made it to Friday. Who would have ever believed it, the way this week has gone, from a weather warnings on Monday that had us scurrying out of here early to beat the blizzard of 2015 to sub-freezing on single digits and lower across everywhere in the South and almost everywhere in the country, including Florida. We welcome you to our Friday edition of the show, and we look forward to kind of kicking back and enjoying the end of the week. Well, actually, this week began later for some of you since it was President's Day. No legal holiday next week, so enjoy the weekend. Anyway, we're here for the next 4 hours at 855-242-7285. We'll also take a peek into what is happening and what will be going on tomorrow, particularly in Indianapolis, where Jameis Winston just shocked the world by announcing he will throw tomorrow at the NFL Combine. Man, am I excited to hear that. Number of guests as well on the program. We'll talk to Louis Riddick. He'll be giving us all things NFL Combine. KC Joyner as well. Always good to catch up with KC. And he'll ask the question, why Tennessee can win the East. Talk about some college basketball and what the SEC looks like. Scott Stricklin, the outstanding athletic director at Mississippi State, on some issues involving eligibility in college football. And Tony Delk, the SEC network analyst, former University of Kentucky star, he'll be honored tomorrow night before the Auburn game. It is Finebaum Friday. That's the hashtag we try to let loose. And as I mentioned, we'll grab calls pretty quickly here at 855-242-7285. It's been a weird week with all the bracketology concerning mascots. We've had renewal of rivalries. What else is in store?
Believe it or not, and I want to address the elephant in the room quickly here. The Big Ten throwing around this idea that freshmen may be ineligible moving forward, just wanting to start a national discussion. What do you think that would mean to college football? There's been a lot of people on social media talking about it, meaning if you go play in the Big Ten, you can't play your freshman year in both football and basketball. Any chance this sticks around?
Yeah, I think the rest of college football would love to hear the Big Ten do that and say, bring it on, and then we'll come up there and steal your. Listen, I think it's the kind of thing that needs to be developed. One thing I will say about Jim Delaney, he's one of the brightest people in college sports, and he's usually at the cutting edge. He was the first to start a network, and then the SEC considered it as well and decided to wait. And the Big Ten Network has been very successful if you like watching Indiana-Purdue games from 1964. 855-242-7285. But we'll talk about that with Scott Stricklin a little bit later on. We'll also get some more insight on what it really means and how it could or couldn't change college sports. But I would agree with you. I think it's a big topic of conversation.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear from Scott because he says instead of making freshmen ineligible, why not give every athlete 5 years of eligibility and just forget about the red shirt?
I like it. Red shirts are very dicey sometimes. You see it. You come down to the final game of the year, and coaches are put in awkward situations. I don't think first of all, not that many are going to play 5 years. The great players are gone. We know that. And if you're really not any good, hanging around 5 years may help you. Look at Alabama last year. It seems like Blake Sims had been at Alabama for more than 5 years. He finally got his shot, even after everyone wrote him off. So what's wrong with that? We're not talking about a big deal. I'm really anxious to get Scott's take on that subject. We'll grab some calls right out of the chute here, and why don't we begin with Donnie in Alabama on this Friday afternoon. Hey, Donnie.
Hi, Miss Finebaum. How you doing? Hey, John.
Good afternoon.
Hey, I just got a quick question. I'm going to have a tough day tomorrow, and I would like your thoughts. And if Charles can hear, he might want to get some pen and paper. I have the perfect marriage. My wife is a diehard Auburn fan. I've been in Alabama for about 10 years, and I'm a diehard Big Blue Nation fan.
Oh, my goodness.
So tomorrow, we're going to have to sit down and watch the game because of the weather. I can't make it to Kentucky. So your thoughts I mean, it's the perfect marriage.
Well, let me see if I can help you. I've got one of those mixed marriages, of course, although I don't know if this one really counts, where you have a Tennessee and Vanderbilt graduate in the same house. Most of the time we have to remember the game's even on. But
yeah, she's not talking real much. I mean, past few years she'll talk a little bit, but I mean, she knows it's going to happen tomorrow. And
you're Big Blue Nation, right?
It's tattooed all over me, yes, sir.
Well, be respectful because I mean it's not going to be a close game anyway, so there's no sense in trash talking, and just let her have her day. I mean, you watch the game, even if you miss the game, you probably wouldn't miss too much.
No, but like with Charles, I mean it's give and take in a marriage and in a relationship. Find you a woman who has a
hold on a second. Hold on. You said there's give and take in a marriage?
Yes, sir.
I've been married 24 years. When do I start taking?
Exactly, but just I mean, we have the perfect. I pull for her Auburn Tigers during football season, and hey, she pulls for my Cats even during football season. So I mean, I'm just shouting out to my wife Donna and all the Big Blue Nation up there, Anthony Simon, Ian McClain, and I thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you. Yeah, listen, I don't mean to rain on your rivalry, but since when did Auburn and Kentucky become a rivalry in basketball? May have been with Charles Barkley or Chuck Person. It may have been in the late 90s when Auburn had that great run, but that's not a rivalry in basketball. Tennessee and Kentucky is a rivalry in basketball. Tennessee and Kentucky and LSU at times has been a rivalry. Right now, the rivalry in the SEC, I think, is this year. Last year and the year before and the year before that, it's been Kentucky and Florida. But right now, I think it's Arkansas and Kentucky. That's what I hear more about that game than any game all year in the SEC.
Well, absolutely. Two teams who fill their arenas on a nightly basis. That's more important than anything. You can't have a rivalry game with a great atmosphere with about 6 people in the stands.
Yeah. No, listen, Auburn's beaten Kentucky in Rupp. I've been to a game or two there. They've had some success. Kentucky has lost a few basketball games in its history. Not lately, though. But let's not get carried away with, man, I don't know how my wife and I are going to make it through the day. She's in Auburn basketball. I mean, what? Are you kidding? Not happening. Lance, who's become my favorite caller on this show, he's in Tennessee. Good afternoon, Lance.
Thank you, Paul. It means a lot to me. I heard John Ball from Tuscaloosa telling me I need to shut up. If you don't like my peaches, boy, don't shake my tree. Let me tell you something. We made Alabama 7 times in the SEC championship. We won 5. Tim Tebow's the greatest player in the series. And I'll tell you one damn thing. I'd rather have a sister in a cat house than a brother in the Navy, Paul. And I'm going to tell you one more thing about Bear Bryant. I won't never forget his call to us, the last call he made to us, Mama. Please, Mama, don't make us play on the plains, Mama. We're scared to play at Auburn, Mama. That's what I call a coward, son. Alabama fans, get it, son. Candy Gator, you get it, baby.
Okay. Lance, bringing some heat on a cold February day. Woo. Woo. Ben is in Mississippi. Hey, Ben.
Hey, how you doing, sir?
Doing great.
First time called and I always watch your show, catch it every afternoon here in Mississippi. And I was wondering, I read a commercial appeal today about these 2 Auburn players that were picking on that Air Force vet. What in the world is wrong with these football players? Where do they get off? In fact, they're so much better than average people. These people have been away fighting for them to have the right to play in football and do what they like in this country. It's taking something free. And they talked about the school will take appropriate measures. Why don't they just give the names of them and throw them off the team?
Well, I mean, first of all, Gus Malzahn knows the names of the players. I'm still not sure where that story is. I think it looks really bad. I would like to hear the other side of it. I would like to hear someone from Auburn who maybe knows these players at least explain the rationale, if there could be a word to describe this type of behavior. I mean, I know the easy thing to do, Ben, is just to come down and wrap your, go Rudy Giuliani on Barack Obama and talk about how heinous this is and how outrageous it is. But I would like to know more about it because I just don't think any normal person would harass somebody with a dog, let alone two Auburn football players. So I'm not withholding judgment because I think everyone would agree it's idiotic, but I would like to know more about it.
Yes, sir. Well, I would too, but it just stated here in the paper that the lady was so upset that she went home and has not come back to school.
Yeah, no, I saw that. That's and by the way, I wouldn't, I can't doubt the lady. I mean, she's a vet. She obviously has suffered post-traumatic syndrome or stress, and if I went to, I suffered that just from doing this show, let alone going to war.
Well, all I can say is the only reason they have the freedom to do like they want in this country is because of these people, and they should be upheld. And I was in the service that was a long time ago, but I just don't.
Which service were you in?
I was in the United States Coast Guard.
Yes, sir.
And I put in 7 years.
7 years. Well, was this during wartime or peacetime, I hope?
It was in Vietnam era.
Oh, my goodness. Pretty serious stuff.
I was lucky enough that I didn't have to go over there. I did my time elsewhere, but I just can't believe it. Two big football players who want to pick on an Army vet, an Air Force vet, especially a lady. Like you said, I would like to know the other side of the story, too, but I just wanted to say that I thought it was awful lower than
yeah, well, there's no doubt about that, man. Well, thank you very much. And I'm not, I don't doubt anything I've read. I've read the same thing you read in the Memphis paper. I've read various accounts. But I'm just, part of me or something in me or within me is just saying there has to be some other explanation. Because we're just not hearing very much about this. To me, what's this all about beyond the obvious? And I know some would say, well, can't you understand black and white? I mean, these are two people who are harassing a lady, a vet, with a service dog. I mean, that's how it appears, and that's what everyone has been led to believe. But I'm just, I would just like to know more. That's all. Simple as that.
If you don't like my peaches, boy, don't shake my tree.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
We had a caller on a few minutes ago, Lance, talking some trash about Bear Bryant, about the Navy, and about Jumbo from Tuscaloosa.
If you don't like my peaches, boy, don't shake my tree.
That's what he said about Jumbo. And Jumbo is up next.
Well, looky here. Lance, let me tell you something, brother. I done cut your tree down. You ain't got no more peaches, son. Remember one thing. Alabama's won 4 national championships, Florida 3 since the SEC championship game started. Plus, we waxed your tail 4 years in a row. And not only that, last time we played you in the SEC championship game, we made your quarterback cry like a baby. And I bet you were sitting in your living room crying too. Now, if you want to talk, let's talk. You ain't nothing. I ain't worried about you. You love your Florida Gators all you want to, but you can't touch us. I told you, you want to be on a real football team, you come down to Tuscaloosa.
That's some serious trash talking there. Jumbo with the final word. Bob is next in Louisiana. Hey, Bob.
Hey, thank you, Paul. Thank you for taking my call. I want to make a comment. I'm not going to put the label of great on Bear Bryant. I think there are very few.
Hey, I hate to interrupt this retrospect, but who would you put the label great on if you wouldn't go with Bear Bryant?
If somebody was asking for a football coach and they wanted to see his resume, I would probably go with a man that coached 25 years, went to 25 bowl games, never had a losing season, had the best 5-year record in college football history at 60-3, I believe it was. That was 92.5% winning percent. Had the highest 4-year graduation rate in the country. Had more academic All-Americans in 1995 or during his career from 73 to 97 He's tops. He's tops. That's the man I would put on a label of great. And if anybody can defy that and think of something better, I want to hear it. I really do want to hear it. And I've been around a long time, Paul.
You have to be a congressman.
And I've basically done some of the stuff that you're doing now.
Yeah.
And I've wrote freelance articles and stuff like that. So I appreciate you taking my call.
Okay, well, listen, Bob, you certainly know what you're talking about. Picking Tom Osborne over Bear Bryant as a great coach. He was a very good coach. I would say Tom was a great coach. But better than Bear Bryant? Will is in Gulfport, Mississippi. Hey, Will.
Hey, Paul. Lance got me fired up, man. I mean, I took a tree, cut it down, made a crappy bookshelf, but I know for people like him, books are like kryptonite. But if he did serve, I'm sure he was medically discharged or mentally. But, I mean, you know, no one even knows what team the guy roots for. He talks so damn fast. Sorry about cussing. I didn't mean to cuss like that. But, you know, talking about my Navy boys, you know, it really gets me going.
Well, first of all, I don't understand why anyone would come on any program and insult the Navy. I mean,
you got that right.
What's the? I mean, I understand a little rivalry. My dad was in the Army. Army Navy guys have fun with each other. You know that. But you have the right to have fun. But just to walk in here and attack a branch of the service.
Yeah, stupid is as stupid does. And I don't want to talk too much more because I might say something stupid again. And I love your show, but that guy is just, gotta go.
Thank you very much. Do appreciate your call.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Big news at the Combine about tomorrow. It was announced that Jameis Winston will throw. That was breaking news. And Louis Riddick, our friend from ESPN, the former GM, joins us to talk about what has been going on. Louis, I hope all is well. It's good to talk to you again.
Absolutely, Gus. Brilliant.
Thanks very much. Let's a number of things I want to talk about, but first, the big conversation about Jameis Winston. How do you see what he is going to do, and what do you think the view of Jameis Winston will be, or has it changed at all?
You know, I don't think it really matters whether or not Jameis do or not in this combine, to be quite honest with you, because everything that you need to see from a physical perspective, you can see on the football field in functional real-time conditions. And what he's going to do here, look, it doesn't really matter. And you can see history has already shown that. Cam Newton came here and threw the ball all over the place, sprayed it all over the football field and still went number one overall. Andrew Luck came here and didn't throw and still went number one overall. Everybody knows what Jameis can do from a football playing perspective. The most important part of his combine is now his physical and more specifically his shoulder condition and what things are. And number two, interviews are like.
Yeah, we'll try to plug this connection together. In terms of the conversation, Lewis, and it's going to rage on for many months right now, but the conversation about Winston versus Marcus Mariota, what do you think, and how do you see it playing out?
It's about Jameis. He's pro-ready right now. And you can see that when you study the film. And we're just talking about a physical skills perspective. The offense that they ran at Florida State, from a run game perspective, from a passing protection perspective, from a route tree perspective, particularly on third down, and then the amount of responsibility that they put on Jameis to orchestrate it all, both pre-snap and post-snap, both protection and route configuration. Those are all the things they're asking NFL quarterbacks to do. So he has already been through the fire, so to speak, as far as that's concerned, and his learning curve will be a lot less steep than what Marcus's is. Now, I've talked quite extensively to Chip Kelly, and I've studied Marcus quite extensively on film. You are doing yourself a major disservice if you think that Marcus Mariota is someone who does not understand protections, does not understand reading progressions, and then that is someone who's just your typical spread quarterback, because he's not. He doesn't run Baylor's offense. He doesn't run Texas Tech's offense. He ran a version of the spread
But if you watch that offense as it progressed during the course of the year in Oregon and then in the national championship game, especially on third down, which is where it matters the most, he was executing pro-style offensive schemes also and was executing pro-style position-specific skills as well. He's someone who will need a little bit more time, but he's going to be a darn good quarterback. And I've already said this. I've said it numerous times. I'll say it here on your show. He is much more advanced, and he will go much further on third down as far as being able to be an efficient, effective NFL quarterback than the last Heisman Trophy winner that came out of a spread offense, that being RG3. I can almost guarantee you that.
No doubt. Let me ask you before you leave about a couple of players that we're familiar with, at least in the SEC. Todd Gurley, Amari Cooper, and Shane Ray. How do you see all three stocks, and where will they go?
Todd Gurley, starting with him, I mean, on the football field at Georgia, he's just a downhill thumper with home run speed that can also return kicks. He has the perfect body type that the NFL teams are salivating over. He's the guy that could break the mold as far as not wanting to draft running backs too high and drafting running backs at a premium spot in the first round, ideally. Now, that being said, his ACL injury and his subsequent rehab is such that teams are a little bit skeptical right now. I've talked to a few people who don't like where he's at in his rehab, don't like how he kind of answered them when they were asking him about his rehab protocol going forward, didn't really like his attitude. I've heard scouts tell me that this is a guy who loves to play on Saturdays, isn't real thrilled about all the work that he needs to put in during the course of a week, which, as you know, in the NFL, that's what's going to separate you from being a guy who could be a one-hit, one-season wonder and a guy who plays 7-8 years. And at the running back position, there's no margin for error as far as your work ethic is concerned. Shane Ray will be, as long as he is used properly, put him on the edge and let him rush, let him work in space, don't have him getting beat up by tackles and tight ends and double teams in a traditional 4-3 defense, but keep him in space and let him use that speed. Chuck Smith is a good friend of mine and a former teammate of mine, the former Tennessee Volunteer who's been working with him, says he will dominate, he will give tackles fits, and he will be quickly a double-digit sack guy. Amari Cooper is easily the best wide receiver in this draft. You've heard people say, talking about, well, Kevin White from West Virginia is creeping up and Dorial Green, Beckham, and all these other guys. Look, there's nothing Amari can't do. Nothing. He wins at all three levels of the field, comes from a pro-style offense, can catch the ball in all different environments, meaning whether it's uncontested or not. And the biggest thing about Amari, I mean, Paul, you've seen how many slant routes he won on down there at Alabama. And the most important thing is, what did he do after the catch? He turned into a running back quickly. And I said on Twitter the other day, the way he can win on the slant and what he can do with the ball after the slant reminded me of a guy named Jerry Rice. That's what he looked like to me. And I've played against Jerry and been in training camp with Jerry. And that's not to sell him short. That's just to say that all this nonsense about there being receivers in this draft who are better than Amari Cooper, I think is nonsense.
Great stuff from Louis Riddick of ESPN, the former NFL GM. Louis, it's always great to catch up. Many thanks for the time.
Anytime. Thank you.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Joined now by Casey Joyner of ESPN, who is high on the Tennessee Vols. Who isn't right now? Casey, thank you for the time. It seems like we're getting more and more calls from Big Orange Country who really think that the Vols have a shot at the SEC East, and apparently you must be masquerading as a caller to our show because you feel the same way.
It's hard to look at the state of their program and come up with any other conclusion than this team is on the rise and should be an SEC East favorite. I did an article for ESPN's Insider section last week. It took a look at every aspect of their team and didn't even get to cover recruiting in this. And I found there wasn't an area where you couldn't say this team should be considered among the best in the conference.
Well, let's go through it because you break it down, Casey, and very systematic. This isn't just some fan at the end of the bar on Cumberland Avenue saying, yeah, I think the Vols are going to win it all. I mean, they haven't beaten Florida in 10 years. But before we get to the schedule, let's start with the most obvious, and that's Joshua Dobbs.
Yeah, over the course of the last 5 weeks of the season, Dobbs ranked 21st among Power 5 quarterbacks in ESPN's total QBR metric. Total QBR looks at quarterback production, and it takes into account strength of schedule, strength of opponent. So to rank in the top 21 of the country in that metric just says, this guy could be one of the best passers in the nation. And you got to consider also that over the course of that time, he ranked 10th in the SEC in rushing yards, tied for second in rushing touchdowns, and was third in rushing plays that gained 10 or more yards. So he's also one of the best rushers in the conference.
And from there, it just keeps getting better. I know that Tennessee has some weaknesses. Every college football team does, particularly one in transition. But you take a pretty good look at the rushing attack. Let's start there before we get to the wide receivers. As I mentioned, it keeps getting better, right?
Yep, it does. You look at Jalen Hurd. He didn't have actually a very good season before Dobbs took over. He only had 414 rushing yards through Week 8. But over the course after Dobbs took over the rest of the season, he ranked 6th in the conference in rushing yards per game, was tied for 5th in rushes at 10 or more yards. You can make the argument that Dobbs and Hurd, if not, they aren't the best quarterback-running back combination in the SEC. You can make an argument they're one of the top, top 2 or 3. So, and that's given where Tennessee's been in the past few years, especially at quarterback. That's a major plus for them. And I also got to mention they brought in a JUCO back named Alvin Kamara. He's got the speed to be the change of pace back that Hurd's a power back, and you could have a change of pace back in Kamara. In fact, Butch Jones said that Kamara's addition could be a big boost to the whole offense. I think it could give them a different kind of now they can attack with a quarterback, now they can attack with a running back and throw power mode. Now if they need to go into lightning mode, they can do that too. So that just really expands what their offense can do.
And wide receivers. Tennessee has been known in the past as a wide receiver U, and apparently that's not going to change.
7 pass catchers at 20 more receptions is what they bring back this year. There were only 11 teams nationally who had that many pass catchers at 20 more receptions, and only one of them in the SEC, that was South Carolina. The Gamecocks lose 4 of those players to the NFL draft. So Tennessee doesn't have an Amari Cooper, doesn't have somebody who's like, this is a dominant receiver. But if you're talking depth and talent, there isn't a deeper or more talented wide receiver core in the SEC, and maybe not in the nation.
The offensive line is better, and a lot of people are saying, okay, we get it. The offense is really going to be good. But last year at times the defense was run over. What's going to happen this year?
On defense, they bring back the stars. They bring back Barnett, who was, he ranked 7th in the SEC in quarterback pressures, tied for 7th in hurries. You can pretty much pick your metric, and he did a fantastic job there. In fact, his 20.5 tackles for loss were the most by a Vols defender since John Henderson. They also have, another great pass rusher and Curtis Maggott. But the point for them is that they've got depth on defense. They bring back 11 people who played 300 or more snaps last year. 300 or more snaps means you're at least you could be a part-time starter. So they've got not just the 8 returning starters, they have 11 guys so they can say, you've got at least a half a season worth of experience. They've got an incredible amount of depth on that team. So, on defense, I think they're going to be even better than they were last year.
Special teams has been a part of Tennessee football since the 30s. That's always been a mainstay. You say in your report that it's not going to change. It's certainly getting better. But let me move ahead, because obviously a lot of things really look good for Tennessee. But last year Tennessee blew a couple of games. They were in a tight battle against Georgia, lost that one on the road. They were in a tight battle against Florida, lost that one at home. They got plowed by Missouri late in the year, and that was a tough week with two players kicked off the team, later indicted in charge, as we all know. But let's look at the schedule a little bit. Oklahoma at home, Georgia at home. These are early season games, and then, of course, at Florida and at Alabama, to say the least, and Missouri. But your assessment of the schedule, and how do you think it's going to end up for Tennessee?
The schedule is one of the tough parts, because Missouri won the SEC East last year in part because it played the most favorable schedule. In fact, we have what we call a weak schedule, and their schedule this year is probably only slightly more difficult than it was last year. So I think Missouri's probably got the easiest path from that perspective. But I still look at Tennessee's schedule, and I can see them winning a lot of their games. And if I take, say, the Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and South Carolina games, I could see them going 2-2 in those games. I could even see them going 3-1, but I could see them going 2-2 in those games. If that's the case, then they're going into the last 2 games of the year against Missouri and Vanderbilt Okay, now whether they're 4-2 at that point, if they could win those last two games. So I happen to think that the game November 21st at Missouri between Tennessee and the Tigers, I think that's going to be the game that decides this division. I think whoever wins that probably ends up 6-2 and takes the SEC East and goes to the title game.
Yeah, I mean, you leave me with the obvious question that I think any first-year journalism student would be able to come up with on their own. But what about Georgia?
Georgia is, to me, it's the same old story with Georgia. First off, they lose a lot of talent. They lose a lot of their players, and I think they lose 9 starters from last year. And Georgia never plays to its talent level. I can see Georgia still going. I can do the same look at their schedule and say they could go 6-2, but Georgia at least one game a year plays below its talent level, and we'll play a bad opponent, we'll play to that opponent's talent level, or play a good opponent and just not show up. And I think Georgia, even though they've got talent that could go 6-2, I think that inconsistency that they always show is going to give them that third loss that's going to make the difference. I think they end up 5-3.
So I realize we're just speculating. I'm not trying to turn you into a Vegas insider. You're an ESPN insider, but you feel pretty good about Tennessee going to the SEC championship game, right?
When you have this many positives going in a direction, I mean, anything could happen. Injuries could happen. Dobbs could break his leg in week 1 or something like that could come up. But when you've got this many positives and you look at the other teams, the other powerhouse teams in the division, and they're all losing at least 9 starters, and Florida's got the coaching change, and I mentioned Georgia's inconsistency, and I think Missouri is not quite as talented this year as it was last year. You start adding those things into place, and you look at how Tennessee's trending upward, it says that I think they should be considered the favorite to win the division.
Nothing left to interpret. Casey, it's always fun. Great stuff. We really appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks. Appreciate it.
I like that. No beating around the bush. That's the kind of guest we like. Right to the point, Tennessee.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Thanks for being here. It's been a fun show. A lot of different topics from the NFL Combine to football. Yeah, football never seems to take a back seat in this part of the world, but there is another sport going on right now, and that is college basketball. We spent a great deal of time on it this week, particularly trying to figure out, do they play basketball in the SEC outside of Lexington, Kentucky? Our next guest takes a look at that. Eric Grisbell from USA Today has written about the SEC. Is it really better? A lot of people, including the coaches, want to make you think it is. Projections would back that up. Let's talk to Eric and find out where the devil is in the details. Eric, thank you for the time. I hope all is well. Good afternoon.
Well, my pleasure, Paul. Thanks a lot for having me.
Well, really appreciate it. You cover the whole world of college basketball. And before we even get too deep into various leagues, let's talk about the story that is Kentucky. You've covered a number of different stories over the years, but where do you see this one going, assuming Kentucky can win and go 40-0?
Right. I mean, I tweeted way back, I think it was December 13th at halftime of their game against North Carolina, that you could crown them right there, that the race for second place in college basketball this year will be great, but we're going to have our national champion, and they will be undefeated, and that'll be Kentucky. And I just felt that I had not seen a team like that play defense with that level of intensity and effectiveness that I can remember. And I don't know how much they've improved since then, but their toughest stretch in their schedule was in non-conference for sure. And the SEC has been improved. We're going to talk about that. But it's not the Big Ten, and it's not the Big 12. And they've struggled at times against teams that they should really blow out. But they surpassed, they beat LSU in Baton Rouge. They beat Florida in Gainesville. That was a stretch I was worried about. I think they're going to get to the NCAA tournament undefeated. And I still believe that they're going to win the national championship with an undefeated record. Now, I don't think that makes them one of the greatest teams in NCAA history. I don't. And, if they were in the Big 12 right now, playing that grueling schedule, they'd probably have 2 losses right now. But because of the conference that they're playing and because of the way they play defense, I do think they're going to win it all.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point because it seems like this narrative is underway. If they do it, it's the greatest accomplishment of all time. And I'm old enough to remember Indiana going perfect in '76, and I mean they They had a challenge. The year before, they were undefeated until the NCAA tournament, and their top player broke his finger. I mean, that's an enormously amazing streak against good competition. I'm not saying the SEC is a walkover because Kentucky played pretty much everyone you have to play in non-conference. But how do we compare? And is not that we have to, but is it unavoidable that people will throw that moniker up there, greatest team ever?
I hope not. I really hope not, because I don't think it's true. And I think that's the question we're all going to be debating, come first week of April when they come out of Indianapolis, as I expect them to. But, early on in non-conference play again, I thought they were going to be so dominant. And I thought at the end of the season we'd be comparing them to 1996 Kentucky, which was probably the deepest team that I could remember in the modern era. 1991 UNLV, which did not win a national championship, had 4 or 5 seniors, and they were just incredibly dominant all the way up to that game against Duke, in which they lost in the Final Four. This team's not at that level. I mean, the quality of the game is not at the level it was, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and I think that has to be taken into account. Are they the best team right now in college basketball? Yeah, absolutely, but everything's watered down, and I don't see a lot of really good teams out there this year. I think maybe 5 or 6 teams I consider very good. After that, you could take the next 25, 30 teams, put them in a hat, and any one of those can make a run in the NCAA tournament. There's that much parity this year.
Realizing we haven't seen the bracket, we're not even close to seeing the bracket, but of those 4 or 5 or 6, if you had to load up on one to beat Kentucky, which one would it be?
I still like Wisconsin in a rematch against Kentucky. You could argue they should have beaten them last year, and I went up to Madison early in the season, and they are extremely motivated. The same bunch of guys, minus one from last year, to get back there and to win a national championship. I love the way they play. It's not the most exciting brand of basketball. It's not the most entertaining to watch, but it's effective year after year, and I still think this is Bill Ryan's best team, and they could line up with a number 2 seed and line up in Indianapolis quite easily. That's the game I want to see. I want to see a rematch of that on the biggest stage in college basketball because it was so sensational last year, and I think Wisconsin, they certainly have the potential to beat Kentucky in a one-game matchup.
Eric, you wrote the other day in USA Today about the SEC. You quote KenPom.com. We talked to him earlier about right now the SEC would rank 6th in leagues. You interview various coaches. Last year it seemed like a terrible year, but 3 teams made it to the Sweet 16, 2 to the Final Four. We all know what happened, and then suddenly we forget how average the league looked. But you watch college basketball. You've been doing it for more than 15 years. From up close and a distance, what's your assessment of the other 13 schools in the SEC?
Look, everybody's beaten up on the SEC in recent years, myself included, and rightfully so. They made poor decisions with scheduling and non-conference play, and that resulted in poor RPIs, and then some of those teams would rise up, beat other teams, like a team like Georgia last year. A good number of losses in the non-conference, and then they beat teams above them in SEC play, drag them down, and it hurts the entire league. But everybody's beaten up on the league. That's old. It's cliche. It's a tired storyline, and it's wrong this year. This league's better. It's not the 7th, 8th best league in the country. It's, in my opinion, the 5th. And they could double the number of bids they get in the NCAA tournament. They could get 6th, their highest since 2008. I don't think they will. I just think a number of those teams will wind up beating up on each other a little bit and knocking one another out. I think they could get 4 or 5, but still there's improvement, and it's noticeable. And there's depth in this league. And when you go to South Carolina, it's a little bit harder this year. Auburn has shown, on occasion, it has the ability to surprise some people. And you have 5 teams, I think, after Kentucky, that are dangerous. And I believe in Arkansas. And they have 3 top 50 wins on the road. So I don't want to hear anymore that they can't win away from Fayetteville. They've done it. And they've beaten good teams on the road. Andy Kennedy's done a tremendous job at Ole Miss. Texas A&M, I thought they'd be improved, but they're even a little bit further ahead than what I envisioned. Georgia and Mark Fox, I think they've taken a little step back recently in the last week or so, but they're right there, and they're a physical team, tough to play. LSU, very talented. They're the most mystifying team in the entire country, in my opinion. Cannot predict them. They could wind up in an 8-9 game and get beat by 25 points, or they can make a run to the Elite Eight. They have that much talent, but they're just losing to teams that they have no business losing to. So I can't predict them, but there's depth in this league, and anybody who says this league is not approved is just misinformed.
I wanted to ask you about one team that no one is projecting to go to the tournament, but it's a constant story, at least here, and that's the future of Anthony Grant, who had a great run at VCU, and we know what's happened since he left. He was a great assistant under Billy Donovan, but he just can't quite get over the hump in Tuscaloosa. How do you see it turning out for him?
I think it might depend on how the rest of the season goes. I mean, I've been really watching this closely, and I like Anthony, and he definitely did a great job at VCU, but it just hasn't happened. And, I thought he would turn the corner the last 2 years, and we haven't seen it. So, they've done okay, but nothing spectacular. I think he could still turn out okay this year and be back, but, I wouldn't feel overly confident about it because, I think a reasonable expectation for the basketball coach at Alabama should be, fairly consistent appearances in the NCAA tournament. And it hasn't happened. And I think the expectations need to be higher, and I think he would probably be the first to admit that. So, the pressure's on, and we'll see how they finish up.
Yeah, as long as you don't park in Nick Saban's spot, you're probably going to be around for a while. Eric,
yes.
Finally, back to Kentucky, because it seems like every conversation begins and ends with Kentucky. A week from tomorrow, we hear from Arkansas fans who feel pretty confident about going to Rupp. I know that sounds strange, but you have been very high in what you said a minute ago on Mike Anderson's club, realizing it's still 8 days off. What do you see happening that day?
Yeah, I got Kentucky winning, but I agree. I mean, that's one they could lose. I mean, that's really one of the only ones they could lose the rest of the way in the regular season. I like this Arkansas team. All I wanted to see from them this season was their ability to win on the road. And I went up there in October. Mike Anderson was just effusive in his praise of this team, his personnel, his depth, the athleticism, Bobby Portis's progression. He loved this group, and he had much higher expectations than just reaching the NCAA tournament. So I've been on board with this team for a couple months now. I like what they've done. They've done everything they're supposed to do. They have quality non-conference wins. They have wins away from Fayetteville. Are they capable of winning in Lexington? Yes, they are. I'm not going to predict that right now. I'm still thinking Kentucky's going to win that game, but Arkansas is certainly capable of making a run to the Sweet 16.
Great stuff, Eric. Really appreciate your time and your analysis. Hope to talk again soon.
Anytime, Paul. Thanks a lot.
Really good stuff. Wow.
This is the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast.
Serious subject coming up here. There has been a new conversation. You never know where these things are going. In the Big Ten, there's been a conversation about ending freshman eligibility. The freshmen at one time did not play. There was a time in the late 60s into the early 70s when freshmen had their own football and basketball teams, and they showed up after a year of learning the ropes. Things are not changing anytime soon, but we'll find out where this is, including a very compelling statement by one of the SEC athletic directors, and he is Scott Stricklin, the athletic director at Mississippi State, and he joins us from Starkville, Mississippi. Scott, thanks for being with us on this Friday afternoon. We were joking during the break that you look like you've had a team of engineers and Hollywood producers getting you ready to go in front of that maroon backboard.
Well, it's these SEC Network Bureau cams are just kind of ready-made. They're ready to go. You just jump in a chair whenever you're ready to come on and talk to Paul Finebaum, and here we go. Happy Maroon Friday. I appreciate you having me on today.
Oh, we're delighted. You in reacting to some of this conversation, put out a tweet that's gotten a lot of That's what I love about the new modern AD. They don't go down to the public relations office. They just go ahead and get right to it. Talk about what you said in relation to not so much freshman eligibility, but maybe giving players or student athletes, I should say, an opportunity to play 5 years instead of redshirting.
Well, I had the idea that, or actually it's an idea I've heard other coaches mention before that I think has a lot of merit, which is instead of talking about freshman ineligibility in that conversation that's been out there, I'd love for us to explore the option of giving student athletes 5 years of eligibility and doing away with redshirting. Obviously, a lot of this is football and men's basketball driven, as most things tend to be at this level. And in the sport of football, there's an awful lot of redshirting. We have a lot of kids who end up sticking around for 5 years, and they get to play for 4 of those years. But I think I don't know if that's in the best interest of our student athletes, and I really question whether taking away freshman eligibility is in the best interest of student athletes. And in this new era where we have the Power Five have some autonomy to kind of set a new course and do things that really do benefit the student athletes, such as expanding the value of their scholarship and making sure that we're taking care of concussion management situations and those kind of things, coming back in and taking away an opportunity that student athletes have had for over 40 years, the ability to play as a true freshman, seems kind of backwards. And instead, I think we should look at ways to expand their opportunities and continue to add even more value to being a student athlete at one of our campuses.
Certainly don't want to put you in the position of speaking for Jim Delaney's conference, but you have heard the conversation. For those who don't understand the story very well, what is their reasoning and rationale to do away with freshman eligibility?
I couldn't speak to that because I really don't know. I do think it's interesting. You know, some of the media reports will intimate that it's a reaction to the one and done rule, and obviously that's something that occurs in basketball. To me, if that is the motivation, I don't know that it is, but if it is the motivation, it seems kind of silly to change a rule that would impact hundreds of student athletes when really you're talking about 5 to 10 a year that would be in that one and done category. It seems like a bit of an overreach if that's what you're trying to correct there.
Yeah, and again, I didn't want to put you in that spot, but I mean, I've read the same reports you have, and it's again, sometimes the Big Ten makes a lot of sense, and sometimes they don't make any sense, and not to put either one of us in a position of speaking for them, but it is a little bit confusing. Forgetting that, I wanted to get that on the table to go to your point again, which we began with. If your idea or the ideas that you've heard discussed that you're helping to disseminate were put into effect, what is the process? Because I think a lot of people listening and watching like what you're saying.
Well, it would go through the normal NCAA legislative process, which typically schools have their spring meetings in May or June. The SEC meetings, obviously down in Destin, will be in late May, and leagues make proposals that they forward on to the NCAA level that get discussed throughout the rest of the year, and then next January, I believe the NCAA convention is in San Antonio in 2016. They would be voted on. So whether another conference wants to bring up the idea of freshman ineligibility, or whether the 5 to play 5 gains some traction and that gets put forward, it will go through a normal legislative cycle, and we'll end up voting on it in January if it has enough support.
Scott, as we move through the season, obviously basketball is going on right now, and in spring sports and spring football, there's often debate about various things. I realize we're 2 or 3 months away from everyone convening for the SEC spring meetings, and I do understand there's great interest and concern about what happens after Commissioner Slive moves on, but what do you see as some of the topics that your athletic director friends and colleagues are talking about and will start to bubble up more in these conversations out in public?
You know, that's a great question. Obviously, January at the NCAA convention last month in D.C., there was a lot of landmark legislation primarily centered around the full cost of attendance and the fact that we're now starting next year, this coming athletic year, be able to offer not only tuition, room, books, and board to our student athletes, but we're going to be able to add a miscellaneous expense. And at Mississippi State, that's going to be about $5,300 a year for our student athletes that are on a full scholarship. And so I'm sure the budgetary impact of that is something that we will all sit around and discuss. But the other piece of it is, now that we have this autonomy and we have the ability to pass legislation that just impacts the Power 5 schools or Division I or whatever, it's going to be interesting to see what we do with it. And we've worked hard to get to this level. Mike Slive and the other commissioners have been instrumental in that, in leading us to this point. But now I think is rolling up our sleeves. We kind of grab the low-hanging fruit, the full cost of attendance, and some of those other issues. I think now it's going to be really interesting to see what gets moved by the various conferences. And I don't really know what our conversation is going to be because we have focused so much on what has gotten us to this point that I think it's going to be time to kind of hit reset and say, hey, what can we do with this autonomy legislation as it deals with agents, as it deals with medicine and concussion management and those kind of things to really make a positive impact on our student athletes. I think anything we do really needs to be looked at through the prism of how is this going to better impact our student athletes. That's one of the reasons the freshman ineligibility really concerns me, because I think that that's taking choice and options away from our student athletes, and I think if anything we should be providing more and more options for them.
Finally, Scott, we have moved past the football season, at least in theory, but it was an amazing year for your state and in particular your school, spending more than half the season at number one, great attention brought to your campus. Now that you've had a chance to, maybe you haven't had a chance to think about it or digest it, what did it mean and what does it say about the hard work of your staff and certainly Dan Mullen and his?
Well, it was an incredibly rewarding year. It didn't quite end the way we wanted it to, but to finish with 10 wins in the regular season for the first time in our school's history, to get to number one in the country, as you referenced, for the first time in our school's history, to be number one in the first ever college football playoff poll when it came out. We spent 5 weeks at number one this year. That's pretty monumental, and it's a great credit to Dan Mullen, as you mentioned, and the great job he's done at our program. He's been here 6 years now, so we're going into his 7th year here at Mississippi State. And I think one of the great things it points to is this is a place you can come and you can invest in a program with the right kind of leadership, and you can develop a team that wins consistently. We've been to 5 straight bowl games. We've got a lot of key players coming back for this year. I think there'll be a lot of anticipation, a lot of excitement with Dak Prescott returning at quarterback and several other key players to build off of what we had last year, not make it kind of a one-year kind of thing, but to continue to build and put ourselves in a position where we can compete for championships, whether it's the SEC West, the SEC Championship, or trying to get into that playoff.
Well, you had a 2-week run there you had many more than that, but the A&M game and obviously the Auburn game, at game day for Auburn, and I was talking to my colleagues on SEC Nation the other day. We were all together in New York, Tim and Marcus and Joe, and I mean, I've been to a lot of places, Scott, but I don't ever remember seeing quite like the one we saw before the A&M game. I mean, 60,000 people at the dog walk. I mean, it's one of the iconic scenes I've ever witnessed in college football.
Well, Paul, you're a great draw. I think you sell yourself short there on the kind of attraction you were for our folks. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. We won in Baton Rouge and had an open date to kind of build up to that Texas A&M game, and SEC Nation was there, and it was an early game, so it was a perfect storm there as far as having a lot of energy on campus when you guys were doing the show, and then obviously we played great and were able to beat Texas A&M and carried that momentum on the next week with College Game Day on campus for Auburn coming in, defending SEC champion, and played a great game, got up to a big lead, and ended up winning by a couple scores. It was a pretty magical 3-week run. It's the first time in the history of the college football poll, the AP poll, that a team has gone from unranked to number one in the country in a 5-week period, and again, it was really neat. It was almost like that first love, for the first time for a school to kind of get to that level and see our fans, the joy in their faces when they were experiencing that and getting to be a part of that. Again, I think it gives us a lot of confidence going forward of what we can do and what we can become, and we keep putting the building blocks in place, and I think we still have a lot of great days ahead, and I think this year is a great reminder to us of what we can accomplish here at Mississippi State.
Well, it was a great memory. Look forward to being back, and Scott, thank you for your time on this Friday afternoon. It's always really cool to catch up. We'll see you very soon.
Thanks, Paul. Have a great weekend.
Great. Scott Stricklin, the outstanding athletic director at Mississippi State, and I know he gave a lot of credit to Dan Mullen and his staff, but Scott has shepherded that program and has done a brilliant job of doing so.
Thank you for listening to the best of the Paul Finebaum podcast. Tune into the Paul Finebaum Show every day from 3 to 7 Eastern on the SEC Network or on the ESPN Radio app.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.